Okay, everyone. So, are you ready? Yeah, sure. Okay. Good. So we're going to carry on. Surprise, surprise. And we're going to carry on with what we were doing yesterday. And just to remind you that the main purpose of these suttas is the idea of right view. Yeah, seeing the world in the right way. And we're going to go a little bit beyond that later on today, but I'm going to stay with the right view for a while because right view is such an important foundation for the whole practice. And without that right view, nothing really happens. And as I mentioned yesterday, the whole Buddhist path can be regarded as a process of purifying the view and making it more and more right gradually. And to be able to do that, you need to contemplate the idea of the nature of reality, the nature of the world, the nature of our human relationships, the nature of other people. And as you contemplate these things, gradually your views start to turn in and become aligned with the way the Buddha saw the world. And it's a gradual process. So it's something that we need to do again and again and again and again, almost on a daily basis. It is good to reflect on the idea of right view, reflect on various themes that makes your mind more aligned with how the Buddha saw the world. So it is a very important part of the practice. And one way that I always like to think about the idea of right view is the idea of brainwashing. Yeah, because I remember when I came to Bodhinyana Monastery, I remember one of the Ajahn Brahmali, the things that he said, have you come here to be brainwashed? And I said, what? That's the last thing I come to be brainwashed. And I didn't really understand what that meant. Yeah, it's like, in the old days, when Ajahn Brahmali went to Wat Papong, which was Ajahn Chah's monastery, the saying was, have you come here to die here? What do you do when you come to a monastery and the boss asks you, have you come here to die? What do you say? Do you say, not sure, maybe? It's uncertain, right? And the idea, of course, with such a thing, it has kind of multiple meanings. But one of the ideas is, of course, for the ego to kind of die. What does it mean, the ego die? Actually, it's something very beautiful. And you will notice yourself that when the ego starts to die down, the ego becomes quiet. That is when you think less. That is when the world gets simplified. That is when meditation works. And you start to understand that the ego is actually a big nuisance. Have you noticed that? How the ego is a nuisance? It creates all this work. Yeah, it creates all this activity. We do things in the world because of the sense of self. We think about things, we justify ourselves, we get into arguments. The ego does all of these things. The more peaceful you are, the less ego you have. Lack of ego, actually a good thing. So have you come here to die has a very positive connotation, has a connotation of bliss, has a connotation of peace, connotation of happiness, wisdom, all of these beautiful things on the path. And so the idea of brainwashing is similar to that. One of the things that we don't really recognize, and this is hard to recognize, and again, it is a sense of self, the sense of ego that comes in the way to be able to recognize this. But the idea is that regardless of what we do, we're going to be brainwashed. Brainwashing is just a state of existing in the world. And the reason why that is the case is because we are influenced by all the things around us. We're not independent. We're not autonomous. We're not someone who navigates the world through all of these conditions, having a steady course. No, we are conditioned all the time. And so the question really is, what kind of conditioning do you choose? If you're going to brainwash, what kind of washing powder do you choose? You choose a bad washing powder, choose a good one. Do you choose the Buddha's washing powder? Or do you choose the washing powder of some dodgy teachers? Right? The Buddha is the best washing powder. The Dhamma is the washing machine, the Buddha kind of the washing powder, and your mind comes out sparkling bright and pure on the other side. Brainwashing. And this double meaning of getting rid of the defilements and getting your view corrected at the same time. Double kind of brainwashing. Defilements washed out, scrubbed out of the rain, ding, sparkly clean, and then also getting the view kind of clarified at the same time. So this brainwashing is a continuous process. It happens again and again and again, gradually over time. This is the idea. So have you come here to be brainwashed? Okay. Okay, good. So see, this is the idea of being a salesman. Yeah, now you believe it. Yeah, now I have you under control. You believe that it is good. Well, this is kind of the kind of the really fraudulent, dodgy, teacher kind of gets you under the control, and then you become an autonomous, hypnotized. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, and you do exactly what I say. Yeah, don't do what I say. Do what the Buddha says. Yeah. So this is the idea. So we're going to continue. We're looking at the word of the Buddha. We're now going to look at the sutta called the Attadaṇḍa Sutta. And this is taken from the Sutta Nipata. This is a sutta that was pointed out to me by Bhakti Sujato quite a few years ago, because this sutta also is really about the Buddha to be, what happened to him before his awakening, and how that kind of these insights and this way of contemplating the world that led towards the awakening experience. Attadaṇḍa, atta is the usually means self. In this context, it does not mean self, because attadaṇḍa would then mean self-punishment. That's what it would mean, but actually that's not what it means. Atta here means to take something up. In other words, to do something. Danda is like stick or punishment. This is kind of a usual, a very common word. And I think, do you have this word in Sinhala as well? Danda, right. So I'm kind of used to Sinhala having lots of, being very close to Pali in many ways. So Attadaṇḍa Sutta. So let's see what the Buddha has to say in this case. This is the Buddha reflecting back to before his awakening. And this is what he was thinking at that time. Peril stems from those who take up arms. Just look at people in conflict. I shall extol how I came to be, stirred with a sense of urgency. I saw this population flounder like a fish in a little puddle. They fight each other. Fear came upon me. The world around was hollow. All directions were in turmoil. Wanting a home for myself, I saw nowhere unsettled. But even in the settlement they fight. Seeing that, I grew uneasy. Then I saw a dart there, so hard to see, stuck in the heart. When struck by that dart, you run around in all directions. When the same dart has been plucked out, you neither run around nor sink down. Let's stop there. That is really the right view part of the sutta. The part which comes after this is really the practice. And the last part of this long poem is then about the results of the practice, which is the state of being an arahant. So this poem, very meaningful poems, right? Divided up according to the gradual training, starting with right view, then the training, and then the result of the training, as you would expect. But this is the right view part. So it starts off by talking about peril stems from those who take up arms. Look at people in conflict. And so the Buddha is here looking at the world, and what he's saying, arms here is not really, it's a kind of, it's a particular interpretation of the idea of danda. But danda means look at those who take up punishment. Punishment is kind of much broader than the idea of arms. So there's a very broad idea of punishing each other. And we do this all the time in our society, punishment in various kind of ways. So look at people, taking up punishment, people in conflict. Now, one of the important things to understand about the world, that it is the nature of the world to be in conflict. It is the nature of the world to have punishment. It is the nature of the world for there to be violence. This is not something you can avoid. This is a very important insight into the nature of the world, because once you understand that, it becomes very problematic, right? Who wants to live in a world where there is conflict? And I guess it's one of these things that then aids you on to the spiritual path, because you want to overcome this fundamental problem of existence. And to show how this works, and when I say the world, I really mean the five sense world, the sensory world, what we know as kama loka. I make this distinction between kamma and karma. Karma is the five sense world, kamma is action. So how can we understand this in the right way? The way to understand this, I mentioned a sutta to you yesterday called the Potalya Sutta. Majjhima number 54, Bhattacharya Sutta. Someone asked about it yesterday. It's really cool when people come and ask me afterwards for the name. I really like that. That became how you become my favorite disciple or favorite student. I'm just messing around. I don't mean that seriously. When I say random stuff like that, it just means that I am Ajahn Brahmali disciple. Doesn't mean anything very much. That's really all that. But it is, the Attadaṇḍa Sutta is very rich in similes. It has 7 similes that talk about this kama loka, the world of the 5 senses. And yesterday I was talking about the simile of the borrowed goods, which I think is a very beautiful simile that says something about the world. And today I'm going to talk about the simile of the piece of meat, which also is found in that particular sutta, and it explains the problem that we are dealing with here. The simile of the piece of meat is as follows. This is the idea of a bird who gets hold of a piece of meat. Usually birds, they have to make do with insects and kind of various, unpleasant food. But sometimes they get some really nice food, like a piece of meat. It's very difficult for birds to get hold of a piece of meat. Bird is very happy, piece of meat, yay! And it flies off with a piece of meat in its beak. And as soon as it flies off with a piece of meat, there are other birds that see this. Like maybe a hawk, maybe a larger bird. So as soon as it takes off, these other birds come flying after it. And they fly after it and they try to take that piece of meat from that other bird, right? This is kind of the nature of animal realm. It's actually very violent and very problematic. So they fly after this bird and they try to rip it out of its beak or rip it out of its claws, because that's the nature of the animal realm. I don't know about you, but, as a monk, I live in a little hut in the forest, very close to nature. I see the birds, I see the kangaroos in action. And sometimes if you are a tourist to Australia, maybe even if you are an Australian, you think, oh, kangaroos are very cute. They're not cute, right? If you know what kangaroos are like, it's not cute at all. They are kind of terrible. They fight each other. Mother fights her child. The child fights the mother. You put out some food to them. The biggest kangaroo gets everything, and it kind of pushes all the other ones away, right? It's a greedy, angry, violent realm. There's no generosity there at all. They're just fear and greed. And when you see the animals, the kangaroo coming to a kuti, it's like a fight between the greed and the fear. The greed makes it come forward. The fear makes it take one step back, forward, back, doesn't know what to do, looking around. This is kind of the animal realm. And this is the bird realm as well. And this is what we are seeing here. So it's kind of, it's interesting. But what is also beautiful about the animal realm is that if you are kind to the animals, they become more peaceful. And they actually start to become more human as a consequence. And I will tell you this, maybe this has nothing to do with this, but I just tell some random stories, again, because I'm conditioned by Ajahn Brahmali. And this random story, this was actually quite many years ago now. I was sitting on my walking path and I was having my lunch, and as I eat my lunch outside, you go with your arms bowl, the people give you some wonderful food. One of the most beautiful things about being a monastic is being able to people actually giving you such a beautiful thing, right? It's this interaction between the monastic community on the one hand and the lay people on the other. Mutual support is a very, very beautiful thing. This idea that people will actually give you food when you go for alms is a very beautiful thing, both sides. Anyway, so you get this alms food. I was sitting on my walking path at one end of my walking path. In our monastery, we have this kind of 18-meter long walking paths, right? I was sitting on one end, I'm eating my alms food very happily, and then I see a kangaroo entering my walking path on the other end, and it is looking straight at me. Obviously, very clear what the goal of this kangaroo is. Actually, not looking at me, looking at my alms bowl. And so then it starts walking towards me, right? The way the kangaroos walk, right? 2 legs and then 2 legs kind of forward like this, coming closer and closer and closer. I wonder, aren't you supposed to be afraid? I'm a human being. I'm bigger than you. You're supposed to be afraid of me. Not afraid at all. And in a sense, that's quite beautiful, right? Because in the one hand, I'm not really that keen on sharing my food directly with a kangaroo. But on the other hand, it's beautiful that the animals can be so peaceful around us. In one sense, actually, it's a delightful situation. So it comes closer and closer and closer now. until it is standing right there next to me. I mean, really literally next to me there. And then as it is standing next to me, it tilts its head because the eyes are on the side and looks into my alms bowl there. Okay, what's in there? Is it chocolate cake or pizza or spaghetti? What is, come on, it's my favorite meal. Is it in the alms bowl today? That's kind of what it's looking for. And then it's standing next to me. Then it starts to lower its head. It's ready to stick its head into my alms bowl and start eating directly from my food. Okay, that's kind of, I'm happy to share my food with you, kangaroo, but please don't stick your head into my alms bowl. That's going too far. Yeah. And so what I do, I put my arms across my alms bowl because I don't want it to kind of eat. I don't push it away or anything. I just put my arms across the alms bowl to stop it from putting its head in there. And that's when the kind of amazing thing happens. Put my hands across the alms bowl like this. The kangaroo takes his little front paws, puts them on my arm, and tries to pull my arms apart to get his head inside. And it's a very interesting situation because on the one hand, I'm not really ready, but on the other hand, it's kind of really sweet, right? Because it's not really violent. It's kind of just kind of putting its hands onto my hands, pulling it apart. So on the one hand, it's kind of a beautiful situation. At the same time, it's not exactly what I'm ready for. So I have to get up and I had to kind of literally push the kangaroo off the walking path. Okay, wait over there. When I'm finished, I'll give you the remnants afterward. And that's, of course, what happens. So this is kind of how you can see how the animals, if you treat them well, you treat them with kindness, gradually become more human. They become at ease with you, People often ask questions like, how can I get my pet, what is the right way of helping a pet to be reborn in a higher realm? Well, what the pet dies. We can share merit with the pet, right? That they may be in the intermediate state. This is what we can do that. Also just general kindness. If you are kind to a pet, they will develop a mind that is at ease, that is relaxed, that will start to enjoy life more, and it's increasing the chances of it being reborn in a good realm. But this is unusual. Usually the animal realm is violent. It is problematic. It is the strong eating the weak. That is the nature of the animal realm. And this is what's happening in the simile that we're talking about now. The birds flying after the other bird. And then the story says that, well, if that first bird, which is small, if that bird doesn't let go of that piece of meat, well, basically it is either going to die or it's going to have some very serious suffering as a consequence of that. So you have to let go of that meat, basically. There is no other choice. And so what is the idea of the simile then? The idea of the simile, the piece of meat, is here a simile for the sensual objects of the world. All the sensual objects, the things that we own, the people in our lives. And because the sensual objects of the world, because they are common to us, the world around us is common to everyone. We are in competition over that world. We're trying to get the same jobs. We're trying to get the same partners. Everyone likes the same people, right? So everyone wants the same partner. We're trying to get the same job. The children are fighting over the piece of cake. We're trying to get the promotion. When our parents die, we're fighting over the inheritance. And the richer you are, the more you fight. Isn't that crazy? You think that the richer you were, the more there is to go around, no need to fight. But no, the richer you are, the more you fight over these things. We live in a crazy society. And so this is the nature, because it is external to us, because it is common to us. We fight, and this world is fraught with violence because of that competition, because of that mutuality that we have in that world. And so that world is inherently violent, inherently problematic, inherently full of conflict, because it is external and we're trying to enjoy the same things. Because we have greed, because we always want more, there's never enough for everyone, because there's no end to human desire. And so this is a lesson that the five sense world is inherently violent, full of conflict, and there's no two ways about it. And that is, to me, really, really off-putting. Because what we tend to think that if we organize our society in the right way, if we get our politicians to do the right thing, good luck. But nice. We shouldn't be so cynical about politicians, because actually politicians are also trapped in the world in a certain way. We should have compassion for them as well. Sometimes they just get, locked into whatever it is. And some of them actually are really good people. So I think the cynicism about politicians in our society is not good. We should be more reasonable. But the problem is that our society, there is no structure. There is no way we can structure society such that there is no violence or conflict anymore. Regardless of how we structure our society, there will always be conflict, always be violence. And that is really, really off-putting. To me, it's like, I do not want to have anything to do with that world. And so then what happens then is that you turn around and you realize that actually what we should do instead of looking for happiness in the world that we have in common, that we have to share, that we have to have conflict over, we look instead for happiness to the world within. Because the world within is individual to each one of us. It is not something that you share with anyone else. And so there is no conflict anymore. There is no violence anymore. There is no competition over scarce resources, which is always the case in the world outside. So when we go within and we build up happiness based on kindness, on generosity, on meditation, on metta, and all of these kind of things, then we have some independence from the world outside. And that happiness is far more interesting precisely because of that independence of the world from the world outside. That is the one we should really go for. And not only does that happiness not have any inherent conflict with the world around us, it actually leads to harmony. Yeah, this is a beautiful thing. Because if you build up good qualities within, that will be reflected in your conduct outside. Yeah, you will start to treat other people well, because when you treat other people well, actually you are improving the inner world anyway. So when you are going to share your inheritance with your sibling, you say, please take it all. Yeah, it's fine. I don't need any of that. I have everything inside instead. So actually, you are helping to reduce conflict in the world by building up the harmony within. It has like a double benefit. Yeah. And so you move away from the world that is inherently problematic and painful, and you move towards the inner life instead, whereby by developing that inner life, we also contribute to harmony and well-being in society. Sounds good? Yeah? Okay, glad. One of the things about being a Buddhist monk, you are a salesperson, so I was going to check if my sales lines are working or not. It's the best product in the world to sell, right? The Dhamma. So it's a wonderful thing to be able to actually share this with everyone. So this is what is going on here. The Buddha is starting to realize, this world is inherently problematic. And this is why he then says, I saw this population flounder like fish in a little puddle. The puddle is like the world. The world is a small place. There's nowhere you can travel in the world to get away from these things. Regardless of where you go in the world, humanity is the same. Yeah, we're all the same wherever you go in the world. There's a the food tastes a bit different, right? You go to India, you get Indian food. Actually, no need to go to India. Just go to the vihara of the nuns and you get Indian food. So, there's a slight differences in the world. Yeah, the world looks a bit different there, but actually, basically, the underlying human qualities are the same wherever you go. We are driven by the same thing. Our societies are full of the same kind of problems. It's funny. At the Buddhist Monastery, this is kind of one of the things that Ajahn Brahmali also says. The world is all the same. Doesn't matter where you go. And he said, people want to go and travel to China and see the Great Wall of China. Forget about the Great Wall of China. Just go up to the monastery gate and look at the wall around the monastery. That's good enough. That will do. You want to see the great forests of Thailand? No, just look at the gum trees in the monastery. That's good enough. And it's an important point. We think that there is something really interesting to be found in the world. The world is really fascinating. We travel here, we see things. But actually, it is not all that interesting at all. It's just variations on the theme. That's really all it is. It's a five-sense world. If you want to find something interesting, it's the inner world that is really interesting. So again, a similar kind of idea here. The population is floundering. The world is the same. You can travel as far as you like. You can travel to Mars if you like. You probably find conflict on Mars as well. You start arguing with the Martians. Yeah, I'm sure the Martians also argue because they are, part of the five-sense realm. I don't know what kind of argument you have with them, but anyway, you have arguments with the Martians. Is that right? I think so. Anyway, so seeing everyone fighting each other here upon me, the idea that there is no escape from all of these problems, you become fearful. Where is the escape? The world around was hollow. All directions were in turmoil. The idea of hollowness is a typical kind of Buddhist idea. Asaro is the Pali word here. You can see it, samantam asaro logo. Asaro means without core, without substance. Yeah, the world is hollow. This is a very important kind of Buddhist idea, that there's nothing to hold on to in the world. There's no way you can stand. There's no way you can kind of, taking a stand is like holding on to something which is solid, that can support you. But as soon as you take a stand somewhere, as soon as you think this is something I can hold on to, the world starts to shake. Yeah, the world is always like shaking, in the sense that there's always like a movement going on there. Yeah, and sometimes that movement becomes very strong, and it kind of issues forth in a big earthquake or something like that, and everything kind of collapses as a consequence. And Nietzsche is always there. There's nothing to hold on to. There's nothing in the world that is stable, always moving. That's kind of terrible, because we don't want things to always move. When you finally find a nice partner, you want to stay with that partner. But no, says nature, you're not going to have that partner for that long. You have it for a while, and then they die, or they leave you, or you die, or whatever. It doesn't last. Finally, you find a nice house to live. Something happens. The world is going to bring it down. You finally get a nice job, but suddenly the job is gone. Everything in the world has that nature. There's nothing to hold on to. That's kind of scary. There's nothing to hold on to. Everything is always changing. And what does that mean? Well, what it means is that we have to hold on to something which is more profound, something that actually is lasting. And what is that thing that is more profound? Well, this is the principles of Dhamma. We can hold on to those principles. We know kindness is something you can hold on to, because kindness is always good. It always leads to good results. Generosity is something we can hold on to. Peace, metta, compassion. These are the things that we can hold on to, the principles by which we live our life. That is what we hold on to in the world. That is why the Dhamma is the refuge. The Tisarana is the refuge in the world, and not the world itself. The world is never a refuge. And this brings to mind one of the very, to me, always very inspiring passages. And this is a passage from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. Digha Nikaya 16, Mahaparinibbana Sutta. Is there anyone who has not heard of the Mahaparinibbana Sutta? Wow, you're an educated lot. Okay, well done. So this is the sutta of the Buddha's passing away, right? And the Buddha travels from Rajagaha, which is the ancient capital of the Magadhan. Later on becomes the Magadhan Empire under Chandragupta. We talked about Chandragupta in the car this morning on the way here. And then, of course, his son, Bindusara, and then his son again, which was Ashoka. The kind of sequence of the ancient Mauryan emperors of ancient India. And so this is the beginning of this kind of gradual expansion of Magadha. It started under the reign of King Bimbisara and then his son, King Ajatasattu. And the Buddha starts out and he walks from Rajagaha all the way to Kushinara, where eventually he passes away. This is the story of the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. And of course, because it is the last voyage of the Buddha, the last travels of the Buddha, it is very interesting, because the Buddha knows that his life is about to come to an end, because he knows that this is the travel when he gives the last instructions to the monastic community and also to the lay people. So it's very, very interesting from a historical perspective, because we today, now, we are those people who are left over after the Buddha. So those instructions in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, which is given to those people who will have to continue after he passes away, are very relevant to us, right? That is exactly where we are. And so at a certain point during this travel, the Buddha becomes very ill. You may remember that story. And Venerable Ananda is very distressed. Venerable Ananda seems to be he's very close to the Buddha, and you can imagine he gets very distressed. And he goes to the Buddha and he says, "Oh, the directions are not clear to me. I can't remember the Dhamma." That's usually a bad sign. You lose the Dhamma at the critical point. And then the Buddha says to him, there's a long interlude with all kind of things which are not so interesting, but then the Buddha says to him, "Haven't I told you that everything in the world, everything that is dear and beloved to you must become otherwise? You must become separated from that. Haven't I told you this? Why are you grieving because I become sick? You haven't taken the teachings on board properly." That's what he's saying to Venerable Ananda. And this is the nature of the world. And then the Buddha says, don't take that as your refuge. Instead, what should be your refuge should be what is called the Satipatthanas, the meditation. That should be your refuge. And why is that the refuge? Because when you practice the Satipatthana, it says you should be the refuge for yourself. The Dhamma should be your refuge. Atta-sadhana, Dhamma-sadhana is kind of the expressions used there. And the reason is because when you practice Satipatthana, it's like we are doing mindfulness of breathing. We're going within ourselves. And when you go inside of yourself, you are creating a world that is independent of the world outside. This is exactly what meditation is about. You're creating an inner world, and that world is independent of external phenomena. And so there's a place of refuge. This is the whole point of the Dhamma practice, building up that refuge within. So when things get too difficult outside, there is a place you can go. There's a place you can find have recourse to when things in the world become too hard. So this is the idea of Satipatthana being a refuge. It's the mindfulness of breathing, the meditation practice, the whole practice of the Noble Eightfold Path, the going within when the external things get too difficult. Found right there in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. And so we use the Dhamma as a refuge in this way, especially meditation practice, because we understand that the world is always so utterly unreliable. One way I like to think about the world sometimes, I like to think about the world as if you are taking a stand somewhere. You're standing, okay, firm ground, I can relax now, there's no earthquake going on. And as soon as you stand there, as soon as you kind of start relaxing, you realize actually you're standing on a carpet and someone is coming, pulling the carpet out from under your feet. And if someone pulls the carpet out from under your feet while you're standing there, you're in trouble, right? It's difficult to stand when someone is pulling the carpet. If you don't know what I mean, try that at home and see what happens. So this is kind of life. As soon as you take a stand somewhere, nature is going to challenge you. As soon as you relax, society, everything is going so well. It's like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when the Berlin Wall came down in Europe. The division of Europe is over. The end of history, some people were proclaiming, right? Some crazy people, the end of history. We have a stable society. We all agree on how we should run kind of things. As soon as you relax, as soon as you become complacent because you think things are going well, nature comes, pulls out the rug under your feet once more. This is what we can expect. Never be complacent. Never think your life is going well. The moment you think your life is going well, you have a wrong view. Remember that, right? There's a wrong view right there. You become complacent. You forget the reality, the nature of things. Guaranteed, something is going to go wrong here. So Buddhism is a bit pessimistic in that sense. No wonder we get a bad rap sometimes. But of course, the good thing is that there is a positive side to all of this, which is the spiritual practice. And that is the purpose here, to move our attention from the worldly things towards the spiritual path. So we are like, the world is hollow, everything is in turmoil, there's nowhere to hold on to, wanting a home for myself, I saw nowhere unsettled. Wanting a home is like a place of refuge, it's a place where you can kind of hang out, you go back home so you can relax in the bed, not understand that the bed might be on fire or something like that. It's very, very uncertain. So there's one of these beautiful saying by Ajahn Brahmali, he said that samadhi or meditation is your real home. Yeah, that is where you feel really at ease, really relaxed, and where you can actually enjoy some real safety and refuge. To find the real home inside, not in the world outside. Because wanting a home for yourself, you're not going to find it in the world, because everything is unsettled by problems, unsettled by impermanence, unsettled, or rather it is settled by these things, settled by impermanence, settled by non-self, by emptiness, by problems, by dukkha, by all of these things. There is no place unsettled that is free from those things, and that is the issue there. So that is the wrong place to find a home. You have to find it within. Even within, eventually you have to let go of it, but that's kind of a good start. So, and then the Buddha says that even in the settlement they fight. So even if you do try to settle down, you continue fighting, and seeing that I grew uneasy. Uneasy here, the world is arati. Arati means like discontent, not really happy with this. I need to go somewhere else. And that is the Buddha's right view. This is the first noble truth we have been looking at now. This is like an alternative way of looking at the first noble truth. And it's a nice way of thinking about the first noble truth, right? It's kind of very realistic. It's a way of contemplating the nature of the world. And usually the way the first noble truth goes is jati padukkha, vyadi padukkha, jara padukkha, marana padukkha, so, and etc., etc. So usually the first noble truth, and actually it means the same thing, but this is like spelling it out in a way. And so once we have the first noble truth, once we understand there is a problem, the next thing is to understand the causes of the problem. This is how the Buddha always goes about things. And this is one of the things that you will see in the suttas again and again, is this, the way the Buddha looks at the world is always looking at causes and results. What is it that underlies the issues? If there's something good, what is it that is the cause for the goodness or the positive qualities or the mindfulness or the meditation to work? If there's something bad, what are the causes for that? And this is one of the reasons why dependent origination, paticca samuppada, is such an interesting teaching, because it deals with the idea of causality. And in Buddhism, because there is no God, because there is no self, there's nothing permanent, there's nothing which is independent of caused phenomena, all there is causality. There's nothing outside of causality. Everything is through and through caused and conditioned. And this is what is kind of one of the hallmarks of the Buddhist teachings. So he will ask then, well, why does this happen? And then he says right there, I saw a dart there, so hard to see, stuck in the heart. A dart. What does it mean by dart? And the usual meaning of the word dart in the suttas is like craving. Craving is the dart stuck in the heart. And that dart stuck in the heart, that is the cause of all of these problems. That is why we have conflict outside. That is why there is violence in the world, because we have cravings and desires that conflict with other people's cravings and desires and greed. And then we have conflict in the world as a consequence. That is the problem. And it says it is hard to see. Why is it hard to see? And one of the reasons why it is hard to see is that because we tend to rejoice in craving. Have you seen that in the world, how people rejoice in craving? Craving is what makes life meaningful, right? What's the point of life without craving? Craving is necessary for economic growth. We have to have economic growth, right? What's the point without economic growth? We can't have a world without economic growth. That's terrible. Or is it? Maybe we can live without. Well, maybe, if the economic growth goes down from, actually it's pretty miserable these days anyway, the economic, maybe that's why we're also miserable, because economic growth is so bad. I remember there was a fellow back in the 1980s, when I was coming of age, and this was a fellow in the US. Everything starts in the US, and it's interesting how the world works, right? We look at the US and we kind of snigger at the US. Yeah, they don't know what they're doing over in the US, and soon enough we take on everything they're doing in the US. Yeah, here in Australia or around the world. Yeah, it's kind of weird how that works. And this fellow, he was a kind of Wall Street investor or something like that. And he was the one who kind of would run around the universities in the US and saying, greed is good. Remember that? Why? Because greed creates economic growth. Yeah, when people are greedy, craving drives people to work hard, and greed is good. It's kind of the anti-Buddhism. Yeah, it's kind of Mara's messenger coming from Wall Street telling us that greed is good. And if you listen to the message, it kind of sounds right. Yeah, of course, yeah, greed is good. Maybe you have a point. Yeah, we work hard, we build up something, we make a better world. We wouldn't have this beautiful world if it wasn't for greed. Look at all the wonders of the world. Maybe not. Maybe the world isn't so wonderful. Maybe it's all it is stress and pollution and problems. Yeah, I mean, there's different ways of looking at this. And actually, no. Yeah, the Buddha says greed, desire is the dart stuck in the heart. That is the cause of all the suffering in the world. This is the cause. This is the root of the problem. And it is precisely so hard to see because we think that greed and desire is necessary here. It is what makes our own economy become larger, our private life will get a nice house. What kind of house would you have if you didn't have any greed? You have this tiny little shack. In fact, you'd be a bit like a monk in the forest. Yeah, like I have this tiny little cutie, 7 square meters in the forest. It's the best house you can have, I can promise you. No cleaning, actually a little bit of cleaning, but I'm really lazy. I don't clean it very much anyway. So a little bit of cleaning occasionally, sweep the floor a little bit, dust a little bit. The best kind of house, right? Because nothing really to be done with it. And when I go into Perth, then I see some of this Perth is full of these mansions, lots of wealth in Perth because of all the minerals, they kind of dig into the ground. There's kind of gold and iron ore coming out everywhere. And sometimes we are afraid in the monastery, some mining company is going to come to the monastery. Oh, there's too much gold in the monastery. You're going to have to move the monastery. We're taking this place over. There's some weird laws in WA where people can do whatever they want as long as there's money in the ground. Dig out the money from the ground. And then I go into Perth and I see these mansions. And because the real estate is expensive, this is kind of on the Swan River, on the very beautiful, actually, city Perth, very beautifully located, a bit like Sydney, with the river coming in and whatever. And because the real estate is so expensive, this enormous mansion are like half a meter apart. They're stacked on top of each other pretty much. Depends a bit on where you are. And I think I never wanted to, who wants to live like that? When you can live in a monastery far away with the kangaroos sharing the alms food with you. That is much better, right? That's actually really sweet and really cute. And that is actually what is far more enjoyable, better way to live. So who needs all of this economic growth? That's what I reckon. And it is so overstated, right? It is such a misunderstanding of what really leads to contentment and happiness in life. It never leads to contentment and happiness. And you may remember the beautiful saying in the Dhammapada, contentment is the highest wealth. Remember that from the Dhammapada? Yeah? Why is that? Well, the reason is very simple and very obvious when you think about it. Because if you are not content, it means you need more. So regardless of how wealthy you are, if you're not content, it means you have to build up more. But the moment you are content, you have enough. That is why it is the highest wealth. It kind of makes sense. You don't need anything more, nothing more to look for. So craving is hard to see because it seems to us to be important. Not only does it build up what we think is valuable in the world, but it also, our sense of identity is bound up with craving. One of the very important parts of human identity is the sankharas. You have the 5 khandhas, right? The 5 aspects of personality. And one of those 5 aspects of personality is sankhara khandha. And sankhara really is the doer inside, the will, our creative activity coming from human beings. And it's a very important part of our identity here. Yeah, when we do things, when we create things, when we build up things in the world, we feel that we are accomplishing something. We are indulging that aspect of our personality, which is the doer within. And because it is a part of our personality, we want to feel like we exist, right? We do, because that makes us actually feel like we exist, and we are. And this is why it is so incredibly hard to see. And it's only really through meditation practice, and you start to see the will dying down, the mind becoming peaceful. You start to understand that actually the will is not all it is cracked up to be. Yeah, it is not as wonderful as we think it is. Actually, when the will starts to die down, actually it's nice. Why do I identify so much with this doer inside? Maybe the doer is bad news. And then we start to let go of the doer, because we start to understand actually there's a problem. And this is one of the very interesting things about the path. The more you let go of the doer, the more content and happy you are. We identify with suffering when we identify with the doer. When you identify with the doer, you identify with suffering. It is the stillness of the mind in the jhanas. That is the real happiness. That is where real happiness comes. And so you start to understand why this path is so radical. It is so counter to what everyone does in this world. It is by stopping the doing. That is where the real happiness actually arises. And this is what the Buddha here, or the Buddha to be still, is gradually uncovering. So he saw that dart stuck in the heart, so hard to see. When stuck by that dart, you run around in all directions, right? When you have craving, you run around like a mad person. And we're all a little bit mad. Is anyone here who is not a little bit mad? Okay, you don't dare putting up your hand. Okay, good. Yeah. So if you are not a little bit mad, it means you're completely sane. And completely sane means you're arahant. So it's always a little bit concerning when someone thinks they're an arahant, because they're quite rare and hard to come by in this world. So it's probably good that you don't think you're an arahant, because we might have to send you off somewhere. But when that dart has been plucked out, you neither run around nor do you sink down. So that is neither run around, so you stop running around because craving is not there, nor do you sink down. Sinking down can maybe be understood here as becoming depressed or sad or whatever. You don't become sad, nor do you run around. You are equanimous. You have an even mind. You have this beautiful balance inside of you. And that is what happens when the dart is plucked out. People often think that life is very boring if there is no craving, because it sounds like it's going to be really gray and boring, right? What kind of life is that if there's no craving? Are you going to sit there like a sack of potatoes or what? But it's not like a sack of potatoes. That's kind of completely the wrong idea. It's more like a kind of a shining ball of light or something like that. That's what happens when you actually give up craving. Remember that what is happening here is that you are giving up this driver inside of you. You do it through finding absolute satisfaction and contentment. That is what it really is about. And so what we're looking for here is not just boring, it is full contentment. And you all have some idea what contentment is like, right? Sometimes when you feel really at ease, you feel really content with everything. You know how beautiful that is. Actually, no restlessness. Wow, what a wonderful thing that is. I'm just sitting here on my bottom, watching the breath, feeling completely content. It is beautiful. And then you up that game more and more and more till you feel so blissed out. There's nothing in the whole world that you want. That is the supreme contentment. And you go into a very profound state of samadhi where there is nothing to drive you, no desire, no craving, no nothing. And that is, of course, when you really find the meaning of life. Because when you are not driven by anything, when you're completely content with what you have, by definition, you have found the meaning of life. Why? Because there's nowhere else to go. This is it. You found what you're looking for. You're completely content. And this is, to me, what is so interesting about this Buddhist teaching, and I was talking about this on Friday as well, is this beautiful thing that what we are really looking for in Buddhism is the answer to the meaning of life. That is what we are finding on this path, yeah? The answer to the meaning of life. Isn't that extraordinary? And I remember when this first became obvious to me, no one really told me this. Even Ajahn Brahmali didn't actually put it quite in that way. But when I was young, I was always obsessed with the idea of the meaning of life. I don't know what you were like when you were a teenager, but for me, it's like meaning of life. What am I doing this for? Studying all of these things. Am I just going to go out into the world, get 2.5 kids, 3/4 of a car and half the dog, these kind of things that the average person. Is that what I'm going to do? Become an average person? Of course, when you're young, you are conceited. So you always think you're going to be more than average. This is just the way things are. Actually, of course, you're just going to end up average, but you think you're going to be more than average. But still, even if you're a bit more than average, you've worked really hard, then you become a pensioner, and then you die. And then you think, what was that all about? What was the point? I went through all these motions. I did it because everyone else does it. I did it without really asking any questions. Is that what life is about? And when you come to the end of your life, you feel kind of confused because you wonder, I did what everyone else did. Everyone said, this is what you should do. Get married, have kids, then you get a good life. Wrong. Then you get a bad life. No, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm being kind of really naughty now, but you know what I mean? This is not what the Buddha said about life. And I say, if you have a child who wants to become a monastic, encourage them. Don't say, why didn't you think of this before? That's what you should say to your child when they want to become a monastic. Don't hold them back. And especially if they are really bright, they are kind of a doctor or the next lawyer or the next prime minister. Don't become a prime minister, become a nun or a monk. That is the answer, right? Very often, the reason why we don't want our kids to become monks and nuns is that we think we want to be proud of our kids. Prime minister, doctor, so-and-so, then I can be proud of them. But don't be egotistical, because pride in your children is about you. It's not about the child. And that child is going to be far more benefit for the whole world if they become a monastic. Even being a doctor, being a doctor is wonderful, right? You're doing a lot of good for the world. But as a monastic, you can do far more good for the world, especially if you are really committed and you are bright and you're able to articulate these teachings in a good way. So encourage your child. Are you sure you don't want to become a nun? Are you sure you don't want to become a monk? Are you absolutely sure? Check out the monastery. From the moment they're born, take them to the monastery, listen to the chanting. Okay, look at this monk and nun over there. See? Okay, you have to hold them up because they're so small. Look. That is kind of the right way. Instead of holding them back, push them forward. That is when you're being a real good Buddhist parent. This is what the real Buddhist parent should do. Do you agree with that? Wow, that is really impressive. I'm really, really happy with this kind of response. That's exactly the right way. And so this is wonderful. Then we're thinking about the Dhamma in the right way, because the Dhamma is the most precious thing in the whole world. Nothing measures up to the Dhamma. So they sink down, nor do you run around. You are perfectly content. You have found the answer to the meaning of life itself. This is what the Buddha promises, and this is what is so extraordinary about this Buddhist path. So now, that is the idea of right view, and you can see here the first 3 noble truths. First, the noble truth of dukkha, then the cause of dukkha, which is the dart, and then the plucking out of the dart, which is the 3rd noble truth. What comes after the 3rd noble truth? The 4th noble truth. So now comes the training. That's why it says that on that topic, the trainings are recited. So now comes the training. And I'm not going to look at this in detail because I'm looking mostly at the idea of right view. Of course, the training itself is also a kind of right view because we have to understand how it works. So let's have a look at this training. I'm just going to carry on until 11 o'clock. So if you need to take a break, please just do so as we go along. So then the Buddha says, whatever attachments there are in the world, don't pursue them. Having pierced through essential pleasures in every way, train yourself for quenching. Be truthful, not rude, free of deceit, rid of slander. Without anger, a sage would cross over the evils of greed and avarice. Prevail over sleepiness, sloth, and drowsiness. Don't abide in negligence. A person intent on quenching would not stand for arrogance. Don't be led into lying or get caught up in fondness for form. Completely understand conceit and desist from hasty conduct. Don't relish the old or welcome the new. Don't grieve for what is running out or get attached to things that pull you in. Greed, I say, is the great flood. The longing is the current. The basis, the compulsion, the swamp of sensuality so hard to get past. The sage never strays from the truth. The Brahman stands firm on the shore. Having given up everything, they are said to be at peace. So that is really the path. And then the remainder of the poem here is about the person who has practiced that path. But let's just have a very brief look at the issues that are discussed here. So it starts off by saying whatever attachments there are in the world, don't pursue them. And I've already mentioned the problems of the world. So you just reduce your attachments. The world here primarily means the five sense world. This is the number one meaning of the word world. Just like we talk about the world, we usually mean the earth, right? The five sense world. And in exactly the same way, the word loka in Pali has the same kind of meanings. It can also mean the universe. It can mean various things depending on the context. The end of the world, Have you been to the end of the world? No, it's very easy. Go to Lokanta Vihara. Is that right? Is that Radha in the back there? Yeah, okay. Right, okay. I don't know Radha. But many of you have been to some of you have been to Lokanta Vihara. So it's available right here in Sydney, but it's really within, right? That's the real Lokanta. If you go to the end of the world. So you go, and that happens by giving up attachment to that world, and it happens to the spiritual practice. When you see the downside, you let it go. Having pierced through sensuality or the sensory realm in every way, when we see what the Pali is here, kame, so it really means when it says sensual pleasures, it means the five sense world, everything we experience through the five senses. And this is the problem with translation, is that when you translate, you have to choose certain terms, and regardless of what you choose, it's not going to be ideal. And so I feel a bit of compassion for Bhante Sujata, because it is impossible to find a perfect term. But really, in this context, it means the five sense realm. So you understand that in every way, and then you train yourself for quenching. Nibbana is the word here, because Nibbana happens in stages. And the first stage of Nibbana happens by attaining Samadhi. Giving up that five sense world is the first stage of Nibbana. And then we have some of the aspects of that practice that you need to do to get rid of and to reach that quenching. Be truthful, not rude. Free of deceit, rid of slander. Without anger, a sage would cross over the evils of greed and avarice. The sage here is the Muni. We have an Agarika in the monastery in Perth. His name is Santo Muni, the peaceful sage. I think he's trying to. I don't think he actually quite reaches his quality of his name, but he's trying. He's kind of leading in that direction. So it's kind of aspirational name. I think it's not a descriptive name. It's more like an aspirational name. Anyway, he's a very nice Anagarika, by the way. So he's been an Agarika for a long time. He has been an Agarika for 40 years, Maybe that's why he has remained anagarika, because it was aspirational and not really, he didn't get there. He's a very nice man. But it's kind of interesting how people have different, some people become monastics, and some people just stay as anagarikas, and some people remain as lay people. And all of these things are just different ways of practicing the path. There isn't any kind of final right way of doing things. So you do what you can with your station in life. You prevail over sleepiness, sloth, and drowsiness. You don't abide in negligence, pamada. The term pamada is very important on the Buddhist path. It is one of the very foundational aspects of the mind that is needed at the very beginning, together with right view, together with yoniso manasikara, together with sati sampajanya. Yoniso manasikara, wise attention. Sati sampajanya, clear awareness, kalyana mitta, good spiritual friendship, samadhi, right view. All of these things are at the very foundation of the Buddhist path. And pamada is perhaps one of the most important things of all, because, or apamada is one of the most foundational things, because pamada, negligence is not a bad translation. It means that you are not careful. It means you're not heedful. It means you're not circumspect. It means that you just do things without thinking properly. That is very, very problematic. Someone who is going to live their life wisely always needs to reflect, always needs to consider what is right, what is appropriate. That is the meaning of apamada. Be circumspect. Be careful what you do. Every thought, as I was mentioning yesterday, every act of speech, everything you do should really be considered beforehand. And if you are pamada, you're not even interested in the Buddhist path. You think the Buddha is stupid. Why Buddha going into the forest, giving up his kids and wife? What's wrong with that fellow? And that is kind of bad. If you have that kind of view of the Buddha, how do you even get started, right? There's no way. So this is very foundational, but it's also something we can deliberately build up in our life as well. So being apamada, very important. The person intent on quenching would not stand for arrogance, attimana, arrogance or pride. Because quenching and pride are different, are the opposite things. Quenching is the reducing of the sense of self. Pride is like a misguided attitude towards yourself. Same thing with arrogance. Arrogance is this idea that you are better than others without any basis for that being better. Is anyone better than anyone else in this world? No? Are you sure? What about the Buddha? Is he a little bit better? Or is he also just like everyone else? It's not a good idea to think of yourself as better, to other people. Why is that? Well, the reason is because we're always changing. So right now, maybe you have a heart of gold right now. Is that right? So maybe right now your heart is of gold, but then later on your heart becomes a bit darker, right? Someone else has a heart of gold instead, and that their heart was dark beforehand. So who is better? We're always changing. So how can we say we are better? In one life, you are a beautiful Buddhist practitioner practicing all good qualities. In your next life, you are a criminal. You know what I mean? And so we look down on the criminals thinking that they are worse than us. But actually, you've been a criminal yourself. So how can you possibly look down upon that other person? It is not a good idea. So never really compare yourself to others. Always have compassion for all beings. That is really the right attitude. There is no comparison is possible because we're always changing, always moving up and down. But there is one kind of person who is not changing. So maybe they are better precisely because they're not changing. The Buddha is one such example. The Buddha doesn't really change. The Buddha is stable. It's called Tādin in the suttas. Tādin means the stable one, the one who is such, doesn't change. And it's not just the Buddha, but all the Aryas in the world, all the people who have gained a certain level, at the very lowest are a stream entry. All of those, what are they called in the suttas? They're called the Sappurisa. And Sappurisa means like a good person or a real person. So this is, if you're going to talk about anyone being superior, and actually Bhikkhu Bodhi, he translated Sappurisa as the superior person. They are the ones who are superior. But because they are giving up the ego, they don't feel superior. The person who is really superior is the one who doesn't feel superior. That's the kind of the paradox of these things. So if you feel superior, you know you are inferior. Right? That's kind of the logical conclusion, right? So now you know that. But if you feel inferior, you're also wrong. Yeah, you should never really feel inferior, nor should you feel equal. This is kind of the very interesting things about the Dhamma. You don't feel equal either, because we're not really equal, because we're always changing. Yeah. So equality is also kind of wrong. It is more like we are this kind of changing blobs of five khandhas moving around in samsara. That's really what we are. And then no comparison is possible. Comparison requires permanence. Comparison requires something that we can't compare. But if things are always changing, there's nothing really to compare anymore. So comparison is actually problematic. So forget about comparison. That is what the Buddha really is saying. So arrogance doesn't work. Don't be led into lying. Don't get caught up in fondness for form. Fondness for form just means that we are looking at shapes in the world. And especially when it comes to things like relationships, we are fond of forms. Completely understand conceit. Desist from hasty conduct. Hasty conduct is one of the dangerous things in the world. I want to do it, I'm just going to do it without reflecting on it. Don't do that. Reflect carefully every time you do anything. Don't relish the old. Don't hold on to old things. When we hold on to old things, we're trying to bring the past with us into the present, which of course is impossible. Let go of things as they disappear. Remember, if you are practicing the path in the right way, the future is always brighter than the past, regardless. So if you lose something in this world, if you go through some very terrible things that are difficult, remember that your future is going to be even better. Why? Because you're practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. And for someone who's practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, the future is always better than the past. It's such a beautiful teaching. And it is very, very useful to remember that, especially when there are so many problems in the world. You see all the problems in the world that we have at present. You see all the issues of climate change, of political instability, of refugees, of pollution, environmental degradation, people getting stressed out, people getting anxious. COVID pandemic is the kind of most minor of problems that we have. The problems that seem to be kind of building up, wars everywhere. But remember, your future is not really tied up with those things. If you live your life well, your future depends on your conduct. That's such a beautiful thing, because it means that we can be concerned with all the problems in the world. We do our best to help out, but in the end, your future does not really depend on getting the world right. So if the world goes to the dogs, you can still shrug your shoulders and say, okay, well, that's what happens to the world. Sometimes it goes to the dogs. I feel a bit sorry for the dogs. I'm not sure if they want that world. But anyway, it goes to the dogs regardless. So the world goes to the dogs. Okay, I'm going somewhere else. Let the dogs have the world. Or the rats or the cockroaches or whatever is left over after we destroy the planet. Because sometimes we cannot help ourselves. We have to destroy the planet, right? It's almost like... sometimes it seems almost like inevitable. You try your very best, but actually our greed and our stupidity and our delusion is so strong that we are incapable of turning things around. Maybe we are not. Maybe we are capable of turning things around. I don't know what the answer is. That's kind of the problem, that we don't know the answer. It is uncertain. It is unreliable. The answer is forget about that blooming world. That blooming world is the blooming world. And so we look somewhere else for the solutions. We look within for the solutions instead. That is always the right answer because of the uncertainty of the world. So we just don't know what's happening in the world. And that is precisely the problem. So we don't relish the old, nor do we welcome the new. Sometimes the new is great, sometimes it's not. We don't grieve for what is running out or get attached to things that pull you in. You just go with the flow. You flow through the world, allowing things to come into being and passing away without really holding on to anything. That is kind of the ideal, that you become this person who leaves the world untouched, just flow through like the, what is it? Anyway, whatever. Greed, I say, is the great flood. Longing is the current. The base is the compulsion, the swamp of sensuality, so hard to get past. The swamp of sensuality. The sensual world, the five-sense world, we are so immersed in this world, is that we are stuck in it. It's like a swamp. We are sunk down to our knees, barely able to move. And this is kind of the reality of the five-sense world. It's really difficult to get out of it. And that is why when you meditate, it is quite rare for people to get into really deep samadhi, because the sensual world has such a hold on our minds. It is scary for people to give up the five senses. Sometimes people do a bit of meditation, the five senses start to fade away, and people feel, wait, this is a bit scary. We are attached to our senses. When we talk about sensuality, we don't just mean indulgence in that world. We mean the very act of seeing, the very act of hearing. That is hard to let go of. The sage never strays from the truth. The Brahman here is like the Arahant, stands firm on the shore. Having given up everything, they are said to be at peace. Giving up here means giving up craving. That's the meaning of giving up. So now we're coming to the final part of this poem, and this is the description of the Arahant. So let's read through this first of all. They have truly known, they are a knowledge master. Understanding the teaching, they are independent. They rightly proceed in the world, not coveting anything here. One who has crossed over sensuality here, the snare in the world so hard to get past, greeds not, nor hopes. They've cut the strings, they're no longer bound. What came before, let it wither away, and after let there be nothing. If you don't grasp in the middle, you will live at peace. One who has no sense of ownership in the whole realm of name and form, nama rupa, does not grieve for that which is not. They suffer no loss in the world. If you don't think of anything as belonging to yourself or others, not finding anything to be mine, you won't grieve, thinking, I don't have it. Not bitter, not fawning, unstirred, everywhere even. When asked about one who is unshakable, I declare that that is the benefit. For the unstirred who understand, there is no performance of deeds. Desisting from instigation, they see sanctuary everywhere. The sage doesn't speak of himself as being among superiors, equals, or inferiors. Peaceful, rid of stinginess, they neither take nor reject. So this very, very briefly. Once you know you are a knowledge master, a knowledge master means you are awakened. You have the knowledge of the end of rebirth, the knowledge of the end of samsaric existence. That's the meaning of that. And because you understand the teaching, you are independent. You know the practice, you are independent of others. And this is one of the qualities of the stream enterer. When you see someone who lives a really independent life, that is one of the qualities you should expect of the Arya's noble ones. You rightly proceed in the world, you live correctly, even though you don't care what anyone else thinks. Not coveting, not desiring, not wanting, not amassing anything in this world. One who has crossed over the sensuality, the snare in the world, now is called the snare. Before it was called the swamp. These are the typical metaphors used for the sensual world. They grieve not, nor do they hope. Because you have given up the sensory world. There's nothing to be held on to in the past, nothing to grieve about, nothing to hope for in the future. This is great. If there's nothing to hope for in the future, you don't think about the future. You become peaceful in meditation straight away. You've cut the strings. You're no longer bound. What came before, let it wither away. And after, let there be nothing. After, let there be nothing. That's kind of cool, right? Let there be nothing. Yay, nothing afterwards. Nakinshananya. If you don't grasp the middle, you will live at peace. One who has no sense of ownership in the whole realm of name and form. Namarup sabbasming, sabbasora namarupasming. The whole realm of name and form, that's everything. And that's everything there is. You have no ownership in regard to anything, not even what you might consider your own consciousness. Nothing that is yours. Because you have no ownership of anything, it's impossible to grieve, because it's impossible to have any loss when you don't own anything. If you don't think of anything as belonging to yourself or others, not finding anything to be mine, you won't grieve, thinking, I don't have it. Why? Because you didn't have it in the first place. Not bitter nor fawning, unstirred, everywhere even. When asked about one who is unshakable, I declare that. I declare that is the benefit. For the unstirred who understand, there is no performance of deeds. You don't make any kamma anymore. You don't perform deeds. Because, why? Because you're not interested in the world. The performing of deeds or kamma is always about trying to create the future. Remember, what lies behind kamma is intention. And intention is always has an aim, it has an objective, it has about moving towards something else. But the arahant doesn't want to move towards something. There's no intention anymore about doing things for the creating a future. And because there's no intention for creating a future, you don't act, you don't make deeds in the sense of kamma anymore. You are happy here and now. You don't want to create a happy future. If you want to be happy, you close your eyes and let go. That is how you become happy as an arahant. You do the opposite of making kamma. You let go of the will. Desisting from instigation, desisting from all this activity, there is sanctuary everywhere. Isn't that kind of a great idea? It doesn't matter where you are. Everywhere is sanctuary here, because everywhere you are safe. If you're an arahant, you travel to the war zone and you can help other people in the war zone. You're not really worried about dying or not dying. That is no longer important to you. If you're an arahant, you're at ease everywhere. Death, in fact, is like a liberation if you're an arahant. You want to kill me? I wouldn't recommend it because you're going to make bad karma. But if you really want to kill me, please go ahead. That's kind of the arahant, right? It doesn't really matter to them. It's a beautiful verse in the Theravada, Sariputta's verses, where he says that the arahant is like the workman waiting for his wages. You're waiting for parinibbana to happen. You've done your work, and now you're waiting for the wages to come. That is the parinibbana, the final ending for nama rupa. The Dhamma is very profound. Sanctuary is everywhere. Why? Because you are free, liberated. The sage doesn't speak of themselves as being among superiors, inferiors, or equals. The whole idea of comparison is gone, as I mentioned before. Peaceful, rid of stinginess, they neither take nor reject. The idea of taking and rejecting in the world, of accepting, of building up or giving up, all of that is finished. You have given up everything. There's nothing to reject, nor do you want anything from the world. Instead, you become someone who gives to the world, give the Dhamma, give these beautiful teachings. And that is what the life of the Buddha and the life of the Arahants is all about. So we're going to go from these profound teachings back to the more mundane things. And the mundane thing is called lunch. But Tina, would you like to say anything before?
Yes, sadhu, sadhu.